The hidden connection between the Masons and the Moors. There are many ways to spell Moor. It stays pretty consistent across languages. It always means bricklayer or maker. It always translates to mason. A Freemaurer or Freemoor is a Freemason. Obviously, mason means maker or builder. Mason means machine or machine or wall. Look, stone wall builders. It becomes obvious in the etymology. Mason or Macon means mason, which brings us to Ptah or Yaphet, the deity of making, the supposed source of masonry. The history is inverted. Human life came from America and into Europe after a reset. The oldest DNA is from Aboriginal Americans, virtually non-existent in Africa. E1B1 made its way into Black America through Black colonists and Hamites. R made its way into Black America through Japhethites. The Scots are originally from America, and they don't look like how we are told. Shemites, Hamites, and Japhethites made their way into Europe, and these are dark-skinned Japhethites. Look. Hamites were the first to go into Africa, especially into the interior. Africa was never for man. Africa was reserved for cryptids, chimeras, animals, and homunculus. This is Mitzrayim, also known as Kemet, or Chemet because it was built by Hamites, but it was later usurped by Japheth. Look, Japheth had already left the Americas and taken over Asia before the reset. Genghis Khan and his horde were a mix between Canaan and Japheth. Japheth spreads everywhere and deceives everybody. G and Y are interchangeable, and Gog can also be pronounced Gao. And we see the Japhetic Asian connection in Mali. Look, when Japhethites took over Asia, they ran the original Asians into Africa. Nobody is an aboriginal of Africa. They come from Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Most so-called Africans didn't arrive until around 1500 after the reset. Civilization was highly advanced, and most if not all adults are wiped out in these resets. As the Japhethites took over, it pushed the Hamites and Shemites deeper into the interior of Africa. The children had to establish what they could with whatever knowledge of self was in their blood. That's why Africa is the least developed area. They eventually reached the Middle East and usurped the Shemites of the area. Saudi Arabia was part of Edom and thus Shemitic. Edom is Bakar, the firstborn, the older brother of Jacob. Mecca is Bakar and was taken over by Japheth. Edom is also Rome, and Rome is taken over by Chittim, an extension of Japheth. Gog spread everywhere throughout the realm. In sum, Japetus or Japheth is banished to Tartarus from the Americas. There they usurped the Shang and pushed the people out. Japheth manipulated his own seed. He spliced some of his offspring's DNA to merge with the fallen. Japheth then moves west, eventually taking Rome through his offspring Chittim, establishing lineages like the Rothschilds and the Habsburgs as front people, collapsing Europe with the Napoleonic Wars, and precipitated the revolutions that led to the extirpation of the original Europeans. And the same thing was done in the Americas once the mutated Japhethites doubled back, taking the culture and the identity of all the aboriginals in the process, whether it's Pretendians, Europeans, Asians, Egyptians, you name it.